How can someone balance reality of a project?
Implement the strategies.
This is SoundView's Executive Insight. My name is Andrew Clancy, Executive Editor for SoundView. I'm here today with Todd Cohen, professional keynote speaker and author of Everyone's in Sales. Todd, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here, Andrew. Thank you.
You have such an incredible transformative approach to sales, but for me it can be summarized in a simple phrase: everyone's in sales. It's also the title of your book. Before we talk about sales culture, I want to talk about how you arrived at the concept.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I arrived at this concept the same way that I've arrived at, really developing all of my content, ranging from the book to the workshops, and that is just observing what separates what I believe are mediocre companies to really great companies. And I've defined that as this notion of sales culture. And companies that I see that I believe are dysfunctional, by my definition, are those that are very siloed. So in other words, sales is over here, HR is here, legal is here, the C-suite is there, and never the twain shall meet. It's the analogy would be like a Rubik's Cube that has been solved where all colors represent a different department, but when it's solved, right, all the colors are together, all the people are hanging with their own people, but nobody's really participating collaboratively in the sales conversation. A sales culture is where, an organization thinks, well, you know what? Everybody in this organization impacts the customer in a certain way. And it begins with us internally understanding what everybody does, which is way more than what their title is. So I'm actually a fan of organizations, getting rid of titles altogether, because that doesn't tell me why I should buy from you.
Organizations hear about the concept of sales culture, and I'm sure you've heard from people before, we already do sales training. But how do you go about explaining the role that sales training is actually just a part of the greater whole of sales culture?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So, sales training typically is a very siloed event, right? It's, somebody's brought in, content is introduced, the sales team is brought into a room, they're given training, and then they're told, go forth and multiply, make more sales, right? The problem is that doesn't really involve the rest of the organization. So what it does is it helps the sales team develop new skills. However, it sort of leaves the rest of the organization thinking, what's the sales team doing? So sales culture is not sales training. In fact, I will often refer my clients to traditional sales training as part of what I do. Sales culture is really about helping the entire organization understand how each individual impacts the customer. My core belief, my passionate belief, is that people don't wake up in the morning and say, today's the day I'm proud to be overhead, right? They want to know how they count. They want to know how they matter. And more importantly, people stay with companies when they know that what I did today or yesterday or last week or a year ago, today helped the customer say yes. That's building sales culture. It's impacting the sales conversation.
Another cornerstone of the sales culture is that the methodology where the sales professional is actually a coordinator of a virtual team, and that team is what enables them to meet the customer's need. But who are the stakeholders that make up the virtual team?
Yeah, so another great question. So, you mentioned, first of all, I'm going to offer a slight correction if I could. So you mentioned that, or a slight enhancement to that if I could. You mentioned that the sales professional is the quarterback, and in often cases, I should say in many cases, that is true. I would actually put forth that at any given moment, the sale, right, what's being contemplated here by a customer, is really a complex set of conversations and interactions. So at any given time, anybody in the organization has been given the opportunity to quarterback and then bring in or bring out the right people to participate in that sales conversation. Yes, at one point, the sales professional may be the ultimate quarterback where something, rests, ultimately. Although I think everybody has a chance to step up and be quarterback, and that's what's so fun about building a sales culture.
Is that part of the process? Is it helping to, when you're trying to get an organization to understand the idea, is part of it that they assume that it's focused on sales professionals or maybe even sales managers, and you're trying to get them to understand that it extends beyond one or two individuals?
It's really focused on everybody. So in all of my keynotes and in my sales culture workshops, I typically have a very mixed audience: sales, HR, accounting, finance, legal, somebody from the C-suite, marketing, product development, because it's a very case study driven approach. And what it does is it really demonstrates very clearly that everybody participates in that sales dialogue. And the best part is they don't even realize half the time they're doing it. So now I'm showing them that they count, that they matter, that their contribution really does have an impact on the customer. Another analogy would be an elevator. You know, if you think about the bottom of the elevator or the first floor being the prospect identification by the sales professional, and the top of that elevator being a customer saying, yes, I'll buy from you. Well, an elevator typically rarely goes from bottom to top in one fell swoop. We'd like that sometimes, right? But it doesn't happen that way. So the elevator typically goes up, it goes down, it goes up again, it goes down. But at every stop, different people are coming on and off, and they're participating in the process, right? Till eventually that elevator makes its way to the top. When the doors open at the top, it may include the sales professional, it may include the chief legal counsel to negotiate the contract, it may include the CEO, it may include just the sales professional. You don't really know because every sale is different and sales isn't linear. So sales culture is as much about behavior and how you see your role in the organization as it is about the tactics of sales training. And that's another differentiator. Sales training is tactical. I'm talking about behavior.
When you're referring to the elevator, that's an interesting idea to work with, because one aspect of that is you don't know when someone steps on what button they'll push for what floor.
That's exactly right.
And there are instances where the elevator could go down again before it goes back up.
That's right.
So in situations like that where you have conflict amongst stakeholders with the sales professional, how do you go about learning to resolve those issues where one of the stakeholders each stakeholder, I should say, has his or her own manager and set of responsibilities? How do you go about unifying that goal?
Yeah, so first of all, sales culture doesn't happen unless it starts at the top. So the senior business leaders, and I say senior business leaders deliberately because I believe that everybody has the capacity to be a senior leader, not because of what your title says, but because of how you see yourself and what you choose to assume. So changing that, as you put it, really depends on it starting from the top, and that behavior, that idea, that approach moving its way through the organization. And what facilitates that is the way that we communicate. It's the way that we choose to interact with people. So I believe that when you go about the business of helping companies build a sales culture like I do, it's as much about the frequency and the obsessiveness, as I put it, of communication, and as it is about going from a reactive to a proactive posture. Most people know that. Most companies today, whether they're big or small, what are you doing most of the day? You're reacting to a phone call, to email, to a text message, to anything, quite frankly, that takes you out of the conversation, the traditional sales conversation. So what I encourage my clients to do is put down the text, put down the cell phone, and get out there and talk and communicate. Use the words, drive behavior modification through living and doing what you breathe, and showing people what they do counts.
What about in an environment where commission-based sales, one tends to think of that as being a very, very competitive environment, and that can lead to competition amongst sales professionals? How does someone go about handling that pressure situation? How does sales culture help or change that?
Yeah, well, so I don't know that we'll ever change, nor would I want to necessarily change the competition amongst the sales team. Coming from the world I came from, which was Xerox and a number of big companies, that's actually done correctly can actually be very healthy when compensation plans and reward plans are done correctly. Now, what sales culture does with regards to that, in your question specifically, is the more people that are encouraged to get into the game, to get into the conversation, the more likely the salesperson will win the deal. And quite frankly, I believe organizations that are not mediocre, the healthier ones, are the ones where we're really focused on winning business and not worried about competing with each other. The more people we have participating in the sales dialogue, the more likely we are to grow the business and not be mediocre.
So that's when everyone is able to share in the rewards. They also can see their own part of the work that went into the process.
Their own participation. Everybody, whether they realize it or not, impacts the customer. Sales culture is about showing that, and when you show that, people tend to stay with the company. So turnover costs are decreased.
You had spoken previously about essential skills of selling, and I know from having done some research on your work, 4 categories. Mm-hmm. There's personal, relational, business, and growth. Mm-hmm. The relational category drew my interest right away, because I think that's something you had said it's probably the most important to the success of a salesperson's career. In my own experiences and things I've observed over the years, that can sometimes lead people in sales to be selling internally when there may be a better way to build relationships and communicate with one's own coworkers. Tell me about how that factors in with sales culture.
Well, that's a broad question. So relational skills are absolutely critical. So we could always make the case, and we've known for decades, and there's been so much research to validate that we sell by building relationships. But what we miss, I believe, is that we need to build the relationships constantly internally as well, which is not just selling somebody internally, but it's advocating for them as well. It's going to them because I know what you do and your contribution to the company, not what your title tells me you do. Because I could sit in a room of 15 IT directors, right? They all have the same title, but they all do something very, very different. Well, I'm going to need to engage them at different times to help the customer ultimately say yes. If I don't have a relationship there where I'm selling them, if you will, on the value of helping me help the customer say yes, I'm not going to get the deal and the company's not going to grow. So the other part of essential selling skills, as you point out, when I wrote that white paper, that special report, it really was about identifying the skills that we all have as human beings, that we all do day in and day out, that are selling skills. Humility, ego control. There's a list of a number of them, as you know. And relationship skills, we all build relationships day in and day out. So one of my favorite sayings when I do my keynotes is, don't do anything different, think differently about what you do, and you'll leverage the relationships differently in the organization because you're helping now people see how they impact the customer.
There's another point about that I wanted to ask you, which is we've discussed that in terms of how the salesperson handles other people in the organization. That issue of knowledge and understanding how everyone contributes, what are your opinions of how that can work the other way? How critical is it for someone in IT or someone in marketing or someone in the production aspect of a business to understand the sales process? Because I think there's a bit of a lack of knowledge about just what goes into the attainment of a sale.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Selling hasn't changed. I mean, there are the basic steps of selling, and at the end of the day, if you will, bad sales cliche, but at the end of the day, sales is pretty much what it is. There are the steps that go into it. What's so interesting about building sales culture is that we do two things. We first of all show people what those steps are, and when we show them and we say, we're doing discovery, we're doing qualification, and you do these things every single day and don't realize it. And then people sort of sit back and they go, you're right. Therefore, I guess I'm in sales. Well, they're not doing it to the customer, they're doing it to each other. They're selling each other day in and day out on, I need you to help me with the project, I need budget, I need your approval, I need you to approve my case, I'd like you to be part of my business case. So when all is said and done, I can show people how the sales process works, and then what they're going to do is come to the logical conclusion in a very cool, uplifting way that they're already doing it day in and day out. They're already playing in a sales conversation. It just may not be as we think of the sales conversation.
I think that's what made your work so intriguing to me was there have been numerous books in the past written about bridging silos or breaking down silos in organizations and sort of leveling the playing field amongst people in a company. But your work is unique in that it takes the approach of it from a sales perspective. Instead of looking to bridge places where companies are sitting as islands, you're attempting to do so to actually get to the business goal.
That's right.
But also not ignoring the fact that there is a purpose for it, for people to understand the sort of connectedness of the organization.
Well, you've said it beautifully. Again, my passionate belief is the following. You could have the greatest set of, we'll say, marketing professionals in the world, but if they don't know how what they do affects the rest of the company, then they're really not that good. You see, if they're sitting in a silo and they're encouraged to stay in a silo and everybody else is the enemy, if the sales organization is the enemy, well, then you're really not going to have a successful company. What you're going to have in that particular case of this marketing department are products built and developed in a vacuum without the input of the sales organization. And quite frankly, if you look at any healthy business product development map, I'll just use that as an example, everybody's playing a role. The person who's buying the raw materials to produce the product, the accountant who's analyzing the price structures, the lawyers who are saying we can sell it under this way, but we can't sell it this way. The salespeople are saying, I can sell this, right? So silos kill companies, and I am not an organizational development guy in the classic sense. So to me, sales culture is really a pretty simple concept. you either play in the conversation or you don't. You're either in a mediocre company or you're in a growth company.
Let's talk about leadership for a moment. Within an organization, you stress the importance of it, of needing to implement sales culture from the top. But one area in particular that I wanted to ask about was the hiring process. Are there certain assessments that leaders can make to determine how people can fit into an organization to fit with the sales culture?
Of course. I mean, there's certainly an abundance of commercially available assessments out there. Now, I don't know that any of those assessments necessarily have a sales culture section. So what I do in my work is I actually work with a number of companies where we will do traditional assessments to see how somebody is relative to their sales skills, sales DNA. The difference really comes out in the conversation, otherwise known as the interview process, right? It's really the process of evaluating people to see how they're going to fit. When we go about the business of hiring salespeople, or really hiring anybody, traditionally it's been done, here's a job description, do they fit these 17 things that we need? They do, great job, hire them, put them to work. The problem is nobody's evaluated them to see, how do you communicate beyond the walls? How do you engage the rest of the organization? Are you going to be somebody who's going to be content to stay at your desk? Or are you going to be somebody who's going to say, no, I need 14 other people in this organization, and I'm going to start by understanding what they do and how they impact the customer. And I'll engage, if you will, the elevator when and how I need them. So the notion of leadership for sales culture beginning at the top is only one place. It really begins with every single person. I even say this in my book. Everybody who's ever having a conversation with another person in the organization has the opportunity to demonstrate sales culture. So it happens all the time.
Tell me about the maintenance of the external client relationships. Are there common mistakes that sales professionals make in that way that could actually be maintained or improved with sales culture?
One of the things I talk about in my book, and it's chapter 6, is this notion of asking how, right? So we close the deal, we don't close the deal, but we never understand how we did it or how we're doing, right? Or why we didn't do it. I'm an advocate, a staunch advocate of periodically saying to our customers, I have no agenda today other than, tell me how I'm doing. Tell me how did we do? And then it's allowing yourself to be professionally vulnerable. You see, vulnerability is nobility, okay? And when you ask the question, how am I doing? What you're about to get back from your customer is going to be marketing gold. It's going to be market intelligence that no focus group in the world could ever give you. No organization could dream it up. You're getting it right from the source. They're going to tell you how you did. And the responsibility and the accountability is to take that knowledge and bring it back to the organization. And when you share it in an egalitarian fashion, remember the unsolved Rubik's Cube, you bring together the interested parties and share that data, the how did we do, then you continually reinforce the sales culture, because what you're doing is you're coaching to, we all contributed, we all impacted the customer, we won or lost, and here's how we did or didn't do it.
And then that's someone who brings that information back to the organization has an opportunity to improve the team as a whole.
Well, that's the goal. If they don't use that information, then you've just wasted a golden opportunity to increase more sales, increase the effectiveness of the organization. So
I have a feeling too that on the part of the customer, they probably are somewhat surprised that someone would take the time to do that for them.
Well, most customers, you can make the argument, right, that most customers are only used to hearing from the salesperson when they want something. So I've made it a practice in my professional life is I will pick up the phone periodically every week. I'll pick one or two people and say, how am I doing? How did I do? What did you think of that? And then I stop talking, which is what great salespeople do. Listen more, talk less, right? So. And then that data has helped me shape my business and helps any mature business professional shape their business.
Todd Cohen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.